We have to find a way to talk and have dialogue and be tolerant between other views.
You have to have open dialogue, and that's where free speech is so important.
Consent's a very important thing, and today in the Me Too movement, it's been very important because I think it's really opened up a lot of eyes.
Cannabis is a healing herb. We as the people, we need to stand up and make a move.
If you committed sexual assault, it doesn't matter when it was, you should be held accountable for that. However, we have to make sure that we actually make sure they committed sexual assault, and we have to make sure that all allegations are verified.
So put in these programs thinking that it'll help everyone, but what they forget is that the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions.
And I think that's what this whole movement is all about anyways, is trying to be open to ideas.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Liberty Talks Podcast. This is Matt Travis, and I'm here with John Douglas, as always. Today, we're going to be talking about Jussie Smollett. There's some breaking news on that we'll spend a little bit of time on. But most of today's podcast is going to be about an article written by David Brooks in the New York Times titled "The Case for Reparations." And then hopefully, if we have time at the end, we'll throw on a little world history quiz because, well, I like to embarrass myself.
It's going to be great.
But yeah, you have the information on the latest things to come out about the Jussie Smollett case, right?
So the Chicago Police Department is now filing a civil complaint against Jussie Smollett for refusing to pay $170,000 to the police department, spending overtime for investigating his case. So hopefully that goes somewhere. We'll see, but it's definitely a good thing. Anything that brings Jussie down and make him pay for his crimes and pay his debt to society would be good, because it should not be tolerated that he got off on this, and we should come down hard on him.
Yeah, I agree, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Do you know if there's anything that's going to happen as far as federal charges? I haven't heard of any federal charges filed against him, but I know he broke federal crimes.
Yeah, I haven't heard of anything lately, but I do know that one of the federal charges is the fact that he sent powder through federal mail, which is way worse than a hate crime. I think that's up to 20 years in prison.
That is a felony, my friend.
Yeah, that's a bad one. So hopefully they get him on that. We'll see, but I haven't heard any news about it.
Yep. All right, cool. Well, we're not going to hit on that too much more. We're kind of burnt out on Jussie Smollett. Oh, but we're going to go ahead and jump in this the Case for Reparations article written by David Brooks in the New York Times. Today, we're just going to read through this whole thing because it's not really that long. It's kind of short, so it won't take us too long to get through. And there's some good stuff in here. Let's just say that. So
you gotta love the New York Times, as Andrew Klavan says, a former newspaper. And
yeah, exactly. That's probably my favorite Andrew Klavan joke ever. New York Times, a former newspaper. He says it so eloquently too.
It's just with that fiction voice he has. Like he has the voice of an angel.
Oh man. But moving on. David Brooks says, I've been traveling around the country for the past few years studying America's divides, urban, rural, red, blue, rich, poor. There's been a haunting sensation the whole time that is hard to define. It is that the racial divide doesn't feel like other divides. There's a dimension of depth to it that the other divides don't have. It is more central to the American experience. One way to capture it is to say that the other divides are born out of separation and inequality, but the racial divide is born out of sin. We don't talk about sin much in the public square anymore, but I don't think one can grasp the full amplitude of racial injustice without invoking the darkest impulses of human nature.
Now, I just want to comment on something right here. Whenever he says that one way to capture it is to say that the other divides are born out of separation and inequality, but the racial divide is born out of sin, really, that's not true. Yeah. It sort of is in an extent, but not the one he's thinking of. The racial divide we have in America now is born out of the theory of intersectionality, that we can judge people's opinions based on how society has treated them historically, and that is where our racial divide comes out of. If you look at the polls before Obama, I think pre-2008. They actually show that the overwhelming majority of Americans were very sanguine about racial relations in the United States. They all thought it was on a good path. Everyone was happy how it was going. Yeah. And then after 2016, it basically dropped off a cliff. People's views of racial relations were just awful and abysmal. And that does come from the left's view of intersectionality, and that they really try to capitalize on race and want to divide us amongst our tribal lines so they can build a coalition around that. And that's where these racial divides come from. They really don't come from slavery and Jim Crow and all that, because all that's been gone for a very long time. And the people, most Black people that are alive today, at least the younger ones, never experienced that in their life. So the reason we're all angry is because of the left with their intersectionality.
Yeah, I agree with that. And as a Christian, it annoys me to see somebody make the argument that this is the only divide born out of sin, because that's just contradictory to biblical beliefs. What there would be, if there was no sin, there would be no divides. So every divide comes out of sin in the end. But so it's just an absurd statement. And then also, I mean, every divide, even if you just look at our politics, like the reason why the left generally disagrees with the right is because, well, in my opinion, as someone that's more on the right, the left is far more degenerate than the right. Their policies, their ideas are extremely sinful to me. I think taking people's money simply for the purposes of redistributing it to other people is theft, and that's sinful. I think that being for not punishing people or not trying to stop the murder of innocent, defenseless babies that are in the womb, that's sinful. Like, these are divides that we have. These are very crucial divides. These are divides on values that are far greater than racial divides.
Well, you see this a lot with the left. You know, they really hate Christianity too. They don't like religion because they feel like religion is one of the things that's propagated really, in their view, the cause of white people being in a much better spot than of the other races and minorities, which is untrue in of itself. But it is amazing to me how they look at people that's religious with scorn. They don't like them, but they are willing to quote the Bible and talk about sin only when they think it benefits them. And usually they misquote the Bible with that.
Yeah.
But so the only time they ever use the Bible is when they think they can club Republicans on it. However, when it comes
Don't judge, John. Don't judge.
Right, of course, because Christianity is not about judgment or anything.
That's it. Oh man, you can't make it up. But anyway, he goes on to say, but I do not think one can grasp the full amplitude of racial injustice without invoking the darkest impulses of human nature. And here we go. So let's look at a sentence that was uttered at a time when the concept of sin was more prominent in the culture. The sentence is from Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address. Lincoln had just declared that slavery was the cause of the Civil War. He was fondly hoping and fervently, can't say that word for some reason, fervently praying that the scourge of war would pass away. But then he added this thought, quote, "Yet if God wills that it continue until all the wealth piled up by the bondsmen 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword, as was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said, quote, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether." All right, this is an interesting point to me, and you're more the history buff, so maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but from my understanding, Lincoln was very intentional about, after the Civil War, there not being like a punishment for the South, which is way different than what we have seen in the entirety of history when it comes to one side winning over the other. They always take over and always oppress. And in this case, he was like, don't take over, don't punish them for this. We've already seen enough punishment. So to take this quote from him and pretend as if he thought that there should be some sort of reparations is kind of absurd.
Yeah, he controversially said that one of the ways he could be admitted to the Union if only 20% of the state population takes an oath to the United States, whereas after his death, I think it went like to around 50 to 70%. I can't remember exactly. Yeah. He was, he talked about this in his inaugural address. It's not that long, but he does talk about with malice towards none, and he really meant it. He viewed the United States as one of the greatest things ever, and he didn't. And he hated there was this big divide between the North and the South, and he wanted to bring the South back in. And I can't remember exactly. I could be wrong on this, but I think he was all right with a lot of the former congressmen from before the Civil War coming back to Congress, which after his death, they all got expelled right away. He was very big on the idea of rapprochement with the South.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I'm not super informed on Abraham Lincoln specifically, so I can't speak too much to that. But that's just something that has stuck in my mind, I guess. It goes on to say there are a few thoughts packed into that sentence. First, there is a natural moral order to the universe. There is a way things are supposed to be, more important than economic wealth or even a person's life.
The left
Second,
hates that, by the way.
do what?
The left hates that, by the way.
Yeah, that they're yeah.
There's a
Exactly.
natural moral order to the universe.
Yeah, it contradicts everything they say. And also this is what frustrates me. A lot of this stuff with reparations is out of unforgiveness of people who aren't even around anymore, which is a whole nother level. But it's unforgiveness. And on top of that, well, let's just stick with that. It's unforgiveness. So whenever you read this sentence, there's natural moral order for the universe. Like, part of the fact that we can forgive people is not just because we should, because we're also sinners, but part of it is also because there's judgment coming for people who aren't repentant of sins. So, like, that's what we believe as Christians. So he's saying this moral order of the universe. The moral order of the universe is these people are going to be punished for what they did. There's no reason to force their great grandchildren to pay some money to somebody else's great grandchildren who may or may not have been a descendant of slave, and there's no way we can really know.
Yeah, otherwise, let's just have the Code of Hammurabi.
Yeah.
But I do disagree with the idea that a lot of the slave reparations arguments come from a lack of forgiveness. I think that most people who call for slave reparations don't actually care about slave reparations, don't care about forgiveness or any of that. I think it's just politically expedient for them. They want to ride the pander bear and pander for black votes, even though they know that it's never going to happen. That's why they never get asked about it, and they never explain what they mean by reparations, because they know that when they start explaining, they're going to look stupid.
Yeah, that seems to be a theme on the left. They don't want to explain what they mean by anything. But yeah, you're right. You're right whenever it comes to the political or the politician element of it. I think it's hashtag hustle justice, as a friend of mine coined that. A friend of mine, Jacob Breton, coined a term that he coined. It's hustle justice. That's all it is. They're hustling for votes. They're hustling for money. It's whatever the hustle is at that point in time. It's not social justice. It's hustle justice that they're after when it comes to reparations.
I like that word. That's actually a good one.
But he goes on to say, second, moral actions are connected to each other. If somebody tears at the moral order by drawing blood through the lash of slavery, then that wrong will have to be paid for by the blood of the sword. History has meaning. It's not just random events.
Oops.
We kind of hit on why that's absurd already too. Oh, there's a third point. Third, he's got 4 points here. Okay. Third, sin is anything that assaults the moral order. Slavery doesn't merely cause pain and suffering to the slave. It is a corruption that infects the whole society. It is a collective debt that will have to be paid.
This is actually an argument that was made by Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Church and some of the founders of the United States, and actually people who signed their name on the Declaration of Independence. And I think this is actually the exact same argument that Thomas Jefferson made, because Jefferson was actually pretty anti-slavery. People don't realize. He just didn't take up the mantle as much as he probably should have.
Yeah.
But one thing he did write about was that slavery does corrupt the society as a whole, and he was scared of God's wrath.
He gave speeches in Congress, right, about the fact that this would be one of the that he thought that this could possibly be like the downfall of America.
Yeah, he did, and if you actually look at his actions, they're actually pretty anti-slavery. He himself wrote the Northwest Ordinance, which allowed all of the new today the Rust Belt states to be entered into the United States. He's the one that wrote into them that they would not have slaves. On his grave, he said he wanted it to be written that he was the writer of one of the bills in Virginia that was meant to free the slaves, even though it didn't pass. So. And he did recognize the inherent contradiction in the Declaration of Independence, in that all men are created equal, and if the government is infringing on those rights, they have the right to rebel. He did recognize that, and he wrote about it a lot.
Interesting. But my boy's wicked smart. You ever seen Good Will Hunting?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my favorite scene on Good Will Hunting, where his dumb friends like trying to hit on a girl, and then the smart kid comes up and makes him look stupid. But then his smart friend that's the janitor comes up and makes the smart kid look dumb.
Yeah.
And then as they're walking away, the random like third party character that he has a big role, but not as big a role as the other two guys. He goes, "My boy's wicked smart," and then he just walks off. That thick ass Jersey
Boston accent.
Yeah, or Boston, not Jersey. Anyway, all right, number 4. He says, fourth, sin travels down society through centuries. Lincoln was saying that sometimes the cost of repairing sin have to be borne generations after the sin. Okay, generations after the sin was first committed. Okay, the problem that I have with this, again, is that doesn't mean it's our responsibility to punish generations down the line. That makes no sense for things that people did 150 years ago. That doesn't mean it's our job. It means that God's wrath is going to be carried out in certain ways, and there will be punishment for those who both here on earth and eternally for those who
exactly right
participated in it. So it's just that this doesn't apply to reparations. It's like saying there will be, so what did he say? Repairing the sin, sometimes the cost of repairing sin have to be borne generations after. It's like saying God's going to punish people generations after, therefore we should punish people. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the Bible is actually kind of anti-punish people generations later, at least when it comes to humans itself. It doesn't believe that it's the job of humans to punish other human generations after. Like, the Bible is pretty anti-Code of Hammurabi. It's not an eye for an eye. It's God's will for if the society is punished down the line, not society itself.
When it specifically says that the son should not be held responsible for the sins of the father.
Right.
And there's more to it than just that, but if you take that verse, it's pretty well understood even out of context. Even whenever you consider it with the verses that talk about punishments for generations down the line, there's context that makes it pretty obvious that unless there's continued sin going on, you're not to be punished for your father's sins. But moving on, it says, from these thoughts, we can appreciate the truth that while there have been many types of discrimination in our history, the African American and the Native American, I love how this is now being thrown in with the reparations thing. They're seeing these two issues as just as important. But so the African American and the Native American experiences are unique and different. Theirs are not immigrant experiences, but involve a moral injury that simply isn't there for other groups. Slavery and the continuing pattern of discrimination aren't only an attempt to steal labor. They are an attempt to cover over a person's soul, a whole people's soul. That injury shows up today as a geographic segregation, the gigantic wealth gap, the lack of financial safety net, but also the lack of psychological and moral safety net that comes when society has a history of affirming, you belong, you are us, you are equal.
I'm not really sure what he's talking about here. One, okay, so he's talking about the wealth gap first between the whites and blacks. And yes, it is true that there's a wealth gap between them, and that's part of that is caused by actual Jim Crow overlays that's gone on. However, you can't attribute all of that just to the past and to the history and consequences of slavery and Jim Crow. The reason why there's such a big wealth gap today is because of the culture. And I know we're not supposed to say this, but the culture of the Black community now hasn't been that good for bringing up kids. For example, the Black community has a huge lack of fathers now, which is one of the greatest indicators of poverty in a society.
Yeah, exactly. And part of the reason for that, ironically, we're talking about reparations here, which would in theory be either monetary or some type of help that would need money contributed to it to help that would relieve people of relieve blacks of having to spend money in certain areas. Part of the reason for why you have fatherless homes is likely due to the fact that you have an easier access to different welfare programs.
Right.
You can get Medicaid, you can get food stamps, you can get all sorts of welfare programs, you can get free phones even to some extent. So that relieves the need for fathers to be around.
Yeah, exactly. And furthermore, one of the other problems the Black community has is they don't actually have that big of a focus on education. And this isn't just a problem in the Black community; it's a problem in a couple communities in America. It's a problem in some Hispanic communities. It's a problem in some white communities, such as Appalachia.
Mhm.
And not having a lack of education in your community isn't going to be good for the community, and that's going to help increase the pay gap. And so, so with all that in mind, I agree with you that poverty, and that one of the indicators of poverty is how people are on government welfare. This is what I don't understand. He says a lack of financial safety net. What lack of financial safety net is he talking about? Like there is none.
We've never had a larger financial safety net in the history of the United States. And we've
It's
never,
actually
there's probably never been a larger financial safety net in the history of the world right now, anywhere in the world.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe with the exception of some European countries, because even when you have countries that have large safety nets, it's large in comparative to their GDP and what they can do overall for their people. They are not as wealthy as us. They don't have the ability to give out as much welfare as far as dollar amounts or, compared to the inflation they have in the country and whatnot.
Right. And the way they do it is they tax everyone into oblivion.
Yeah.
But you see here, the way I see it is maybe he's right. Maybe we don't have financial safety net, but what we do have is a financial safety web where once you get in it, you cannot get out.
Yeah. And
that is one of the biggest problems with it. And the lack of psychological and moral safety net, I don't know what that's supposed to mean. That's what I said earlier. I don't understand. That's what I don't understand. Like a such psychological and moral safety net. Presumably that would be your church. And if you're not going to church, that's not the fault of me or my ancestors. That's your fault.
Yeah. That's a whole nother subject.
But anyways, it's not what this article is entirely about. So
yeah. I could go on a whole rant on that last sentence itself. We might get into that later on some other stuff. But all right, we'll continue on though. Nearly 5 years ago, I read, how do you say this guy's name?
Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Huh?
Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Ta-Nehisi. Okay, Ta-Nehisi Coates. Okay. Ta-Nehisi Coates, Atlantic article.
Ta-Nehisi Coates is one of the most influential writers for the left.
Yeah, I know. It's I remember this article came out, but I never bothered to learn how to say his name, probably because the insane ramblings of where's this article.
Right.
I hear his name constantly, and for some reason I can never say it. I won't be able to say it tomorrow, I guarantee you. But Ta-Nehisi Coates' Atlantic article, The Case for Reparations, he read that 5 years ago with mild disagreement. He says, all sorts of practical objections leapt into mind. This is my favorite part of this whole article. All sorts of practical objections leapt into mind. What about the recent African immigrants? What about the poor whites who have nothing of what you would call privilege? Do we pay Oprah and LeBron? This is my favorite part, and you'll find out why it's my favorite part as we go throughout this article. And that's because he doesn't answer any of these objections. He says, I didn't believe in reparations because of 1, 2, and 3. He doesn't answer why 1 is no longer true. He doesn't answer why 2 is no longer true for him. And he doesn't answer why number 3 is no longer true for him. So why, if I have these same objections, why should I now change my mind?
Let's see what he says.
So he says, but I have so many experiences over the past year. Sitting, for example, with an elderly black woman in South Carolina, shaking in rage because the kids in her neighborhood face greater challenges than she did growing up in 1953. That suggests we are at another moment of make or break racial reckoning. So I read this article came out a little while back.
About 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago. That's about right. And when it first came out, my boss, who was black, read this, and he got to this part, and he goes, what the? That was literally his response. He goes, 1953. How did it was hilarious because he's just astonished that he's sitting there, a black man in America today in the South, is sitting there reading this and going, what is she talking about that the kids in her neighborhood face greater challenges in 1953 in the context of the conversation of race? Now, maybe they face greater moral arguments, as he mentioned earlier, moral obstacles, as he mentioned earlier. Maybe there's something else going on that's harder for young black kids today. But in the context of discrimination and race, things that would say we need to give them reparations because the people now are currently responsible for this. Yeah,
I mean, at least you're not being held back by state law.
Yeah, Exactly. Like you're saying that you literally can't go into certain places because of the color of your skin.
Mm-hmm.
Like a time when that was not only legal, but whenever businesses were to some extent forced to do it.
Yeah, I mean, most businesses were forced to do it. It's actually a myth that a lot of businesses just didn't want black people in their restaurants or anything. It was state laws that made it where they couldn't.
Yeah, and even if they didn't, let's say most businesses didn't want blacks in their restaurants. If you don't want blacks in your restaurants, and there's a law that says you're not allowed to let blacks in your restaurants, or they have to sit in a different place, you now have something to say. Well, it's the law. You don't have to tell people, no, I don't want blacks in my restaurant. You can just go, well, yeah, exactly. It's the law, man. That's not what I would want to do, even though it really is. It's not what I would want to do, but it's the law. So now you have something to fall back on. So this could have been ended a lot earlier. A lot of the segregation and Jim Crow laws could have been, well, not Jim Crow laws because that would have taken legislation, but a lot of the segregation could have possibly ended a lot earlier if you just didn't have the Jim Crow laws in place at all. You may have not needed you would need a Civil Rights Act, but you may have not needed a Civil Rights Act that went as far as it did if they just didn't have those laws in place to begin with.
That's exactly right. It's why capitalism is the greatest equalizer, because these businesses did want to serve black customers. Black customers had money, and they're going to give them their money. But the Jim Crow laws really held them back, and that's why this is such a stupid idea that white kids now have it harder than black kids did in 1953. Because black kids now, the only thing they have it harder on is the amount of single motherhood families, like I said earlier, are just astonishing right now in the black community, where in 1953 they actually had really good social cohesion.
Yeah, the black family is far stronger back then, and ironically, this all kind of started tumbling down around the late 60s and early 70s. What happened in the late 60s, John? What was going on then?
Well, in the late 60s, we had the civil rights movement.
And then you had massive welfare expansion after that.
Yeah, under LBJ.
So it's almost like the civil rights movement itself didn't solve a whole lot. And then it solved the state and federal level discrimination. But as far as like individual basis, one-on-one human, one human to another, not in the not a transaction that's being overseen by the state. When you take that out of context, then it was more so that they had strong families is why they were moving up from the time of slavery till then.
Right.
And then it seems like about the time that welfare kind of kicked in is whenever the black family starts to kind of fall apart over time.
Yeah, and that's definitely something linkable. You can see if you link that to different societies across America. Anyways, that article's actually almost over. See, it is.
Yeah, we're pretty close to the end here. We've got Coates' essay seems right now, especially this part. What in the heck? Did I skip a part? No. That suggests we are another moment of make or break reckoning of racial reckoning. Okay, here we go. Coates' essay seems right now, especially this part, and he quotes Coates' article from 5 years ago. And so we must imagine a new country, reparations, by which I mean the full acceptance of our collective biography and its consequences, is the price we must pay to see ourselves squarely. What I'm talking about is more than recompense for past injustices, more than a handout, a payoff, hush money, or a reluctant bribe. What I'm talking about is a national reckoning that will lead to spiritual renewal. I have no idea what that means.
Yeah, me neither. I'm sitting here trying to figure it out. It's really just kind of talking. But let's see what he thinks of it.
It's just jibber jabber. And it doesn't, again, we still haven't answered any of these objections that he's given up here as to why he used to not agree with it, but now agrees with it.
But this is what Coates said. So let's see how Mr. Brooks responds to that quote. We're a nation coming apart at the seams, a nation in which each tribe has its own narrative, and the narratives are generally resentment narratives. The African-American experience is somehow at the core of this fragmentation, the original sin that hardens the heart, separates Americans from one another, and serves as a model and fuel for other injustices. The need now is to consolidate all the different narratives and make them reconciliation and possibility narratives, in which all feel known. That requires direct action, a concrete gesture of respect that makes possible the beginning of a new chapter in our common life. Reparations are a drastic policy and hard to execute, but the very act of talking about and designing them heals a wound and opens a new story. So this is the problem with it. And that's the end of the article, by the way. That's where it ends. The problem with it is he said he had the obvious objections, like what about black people who's immigrated to the country? What about white people who's immigrated to the country for slavery reparations? What about people who are half black? What about people that's a tenth black? What about people who I really just, what about the argument that people aren't responsible for the crimes of their ancestors? Just forgets all that and says, well,
Yeah.
like, not really a problem anymore. Now it's a good idea. Why is it a good idea? Because David Brooks says it's a good idea, and Ta-Nehisi Coates says it's a good idea, without actually explaining any of the practical questions, even though he brought them up. Like, you brought up these objections, and you don't explain the objections. You just pretend the objections don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And
these aren't even my main objections to the idea of reparations. But whenever I read these, I go like, these are reasonable objections. Like, these are reasonable questions of like, well, how is this practically going to work out? This doesn't make any sense practically. Like, forget the moral implications, forget the justice versus injustice, conversation. Just practically, how does this work? And obviously it doesn't. And then he says practically it doesn't work. And I used to think it practically didn't work.
But
then has no answer.
Yeah, but now it will definitely work. What changed? Nothing. So, but of course, and the reason we read this is because this is becoming a theme amongst the left, in which a lot of them are embracing slavery reparations with no actual plan on how to do so. In fact, the only plans they've talked about is just like higher taxes, which isn't slavery reparations.
Yeah.
So you've heard people like Beto O'Rourke talk about this. I think Elizabeth Warren talks about this. And this article basically sums up how they feel about it. Yes, there's problems with slavery reparations, and these problems make it basically impossible. Therefore, how do we address these problems? We don't. We just keep sloganeering so we can ride on that pander bear and keep pandering to the black community. And this is what makes it so frustrating.
And this is another thing like the Green New Deal, where they will virtue signal, and then whenever it comes time to actually vote on their insane ideas, they will not vote for their insane ideas. And sadly, I think that keeps a lot of so-called moderate Democrats voting for them over and over, because they know they won't actually do what they're going to say whenever it comes to the more fringe ideas that they have.
Yeah, definitely. So,
except for the fringe idea of killing a 9-month-old baby. They'll do that. We've proven that.
Yeah, they love that one. But with that, let's move away from this repository of stupidity and have a little bit of fun. We actually are going to do another history quiz. This time it's going to be some more world history, which we have some questions for each other. So do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
What did I do? You go first, because I deleted my questions. So
all right.
I'm gonna search for them while I'm listening to your question.
Now, remember, last time, Matt, I think, only got one answer right. So I made the questions a little bit easier.
No, you're not supposed to say that up front, though. You're just supposed to ask me.
Oh, well, maybe knowing that would help you out. So let's start with the first one. World War I began in which year?
Oh, man. Oh, now I got to think of the exact year. I can give you the time period. Hold on, let me think. What year did it begin? 1914.
You got it.
Yes.
I hope you didn't look that up.
No, I didn't look it up. I swear I didn't look it up.
All
right. Starting off good. All right, yours are probably all going to be hard because I didn't even look at all these. All right, anyway. Question, why is this a world history question? I don't care. I'm still asking you. All right. Which of the following figures did not live in the 6th century BC?
Okay.
Confucius, Buddha, Pythagoras, Nero. 6th century BC, did not live in the 6th century BC.
I'm going to
Confucius, Buddha,
Emperor Nero.
Nero. This one actually is like a legit quiz. I don't know if I like this. You are correct.
Yeah, yeah, that's an easy one.
Yeah. That's AD territory.
Mhm. All right. Here's a really difficult one. Okay, what country was Adolf Hitler born in?
I feel like this is a trick question. This is a trick question. All right. I have two thoughts in my head.
Okay.
Two countries in my head.
Well, your first one is your answer. Anything after that's wrong.
Well, I feel like it's almost Germany.
No, it's Austria.
Austria?
It's Austria.
Oh, why didn't I say Austria first? I thought it was a trick, and then I thought no, it's not a trick.
Come on.
It's a trick. I knew it was Austria. I don't know why I said Germany.
All right. Well, hit me with another one.
Huh? Oh,
Hit
yeah.
me with another one.
The departure of Soviet troops from Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia. Anyway, the departure of Soviet troops from Czechoslovakia in 1991 was the result of the Velvet Revolution, the October Revolution, the Prague. Is that how you spell that? The Prague Spring, Prague.
Prague.
Prague. This is the problem. The Prague Spring, the Cultural Revolution.
I'm going to say the Velvet Revolution.
The Velvet Revolution. All right. Correct.
Yeah.
No, you're correct, though.
All right. Here's my next one for you. What city was John F. Kennedy assassinated in?
Dallas, Texas.
All right. You didn't have to think about that one.
I know. I live in Dallas, Texas.
There
So I
you-
kind of cheated.
Oh, then cheater, I got to ask you a different one. All right. Name a leader, an American leader who fought in the War of 1812.
Oh, man.
Specifically, name the one that defended New Orleans during the siege of New Orleans.
Oh, no, I got nothing.
You know who it is.
Let me think. War of 1812. No, I have no idea.
Andrew Jackson.
Andrew Jackson. Dang it.
All right.
All right. What's the INCAN Empire? Should I know what that is?
INCAN.
Yeah, the Incan Empire.
Yeah, the Incan. Yeah, you should know what that is.
Oh, the Incan. Oh my God, I'm an idiot. All right. We're gonna pretend like that didn't happen. The Incan Empire was located in what is now Mexico, Central America, Peru, or Brazil.
Peru.
I feel like that was a little bit too easy.
That one was easy.
Although I can't say I can't read the word Incan, so there's that.
All right. Well, here's one that you might know. What decade was American involvement in Korea take place in?
What decade did American involvement in Korean? Like
In the Korean War.
in the Korean War. Okay, all right. I was about to say involvement in Korean. That's a whole different thing. The Korean War.
Yeah.
What decade?
Yeah.
1950s.
Good.
It's almost too easy. Come on now. All right.
All right.
The Battle of Bulge took place in.
The Battle of what?
That's not. I didn't say that right. Why can I not say any words at all today? The Battle of Bulge. B-U-L-G.
The Battle of the Bulge.
Battle of the Bulge. So I was right. Why did I think that was said? Never mind. Battle of the Bulge took place in. You got this.
Oh, I don't get a multiple choice.
Oh, my bad. World War I, World War II, the Napoleonic Wars, Vietnam.
I actually think it's Napoleonic Wars, but I could be wrong.
Nope, it was the World War II.
World War II.
The
Yeah. Okay, I'm dumb. I don't know any history. All right. Here's an easy one. Okay, everyone has learned this in high school. Who invaded England in 1066 and won at the Battle of Hastings?
Invaded England in 1060. Oh man, see, I should know this. No, I don't know.
Duke William the Conqueror. Who
Sounds
did
great.
William?
Do what?
Duke William the Conqueror of Normandy.
Okay, Normandy.
Come on, that's a big one. All right,
No.
all right, I got the next one. Can't believe I got the Battle of the Bulge wrong.
All right, who crossed the Rubicon? The Rubicon.
I have no idea.
Alexander the Great, Augustus Caesar, Julius Caesar, the Spartans.
I'm gonna say Julius Caesar.
Hey, got it.
All right. All right. Let's see. Who was the first man to develop the printing press? I don't think you're gonna get this one.
Do what?
I don't think you're gonna get it.
Develop the printing press.
But you should know it since it's your field.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think. I know why it was developed. Oh, who was it though? 15th.
You give up?
Hold on. Oh, I don't know. I'm not gonna be able to think of who it was that actually developed it.
Johannes Gutenberg.
Okay.
All right. I'm ready for this. I can answer any of these.
All right. Before independence, Bangladesh was called
East Pakistan.
Yep.
Give me some easy ones. All right. Here I'm gonna help you out a little bit. What two countries fought in the 100 Years' War?
What two countries? 100 Years' War. Oh my God! Why can I not think of what?
I can imagine there's people just turning off the podcast now because they're just
Probably.
like, come on, Matt.
No, I don't know. I'm not good with history.
England and France.
England and France. Okay.
You know, Joan of Arc.
Yeah.
Okay.
Continue on. I'm not gonna say. Oh,
Okay.
never mind, I gotta ask you a question now.
Yeah.
What was the greatest Western schism?
The Great Western Schism.
Yeah, schism. There you go. Schism. Why did I say that? All right. Christianity split into Catholicism and Protestantism.
No, it was the Great Schism was between the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church.
Eastern Orthodox Church and Western Roman Church divided.
Yeah. See, I'm right. Got it.
Oh, it says sorry, you're wrong. There was other options though that might have been more specific and more correct. All right, what was the correct answer? More than one pope claimed authority over the Roman Catholic Church.
Well, that's the history of it, but it's caused the schism between the Catholics and the Eastern
What
Orthodox.
was the question again? Was it? Anyway.
Well, yeah. If you want to
I
go
can't
over the
see the question.
history, then yeah, the reason the schism happened is because the Pope in Rome, who was the Patriarch of Rome, declared that he was the heir to Saint Peter, and therefore he has more authority over the other patriarchs in Constantinople, Antioch, Jerusalem, and Alexandria, which caused the Great Schism. But the Great Schism was what separated the Catholic Church from the Orthodox Church. So what a stupid question.
You just embarrassed factamonster.com. Congratulations. Someone just lost a job. I'm gonna cut that clip out and I'm gonna email it to him.
Sounds like a good idea. Okay. Here's one you should know. This is
Don't say I should know it.
You're good at religion, so you should know it.
I don't know if I'm good at religion. I can just read the text and understand what it says. I'm not a psycho person like half the people today.
Well, you should know this one. Who wrote the document known as the 95 Theses?
Oh man, I'm not. This is what I should know. All right, 95. I don't know.
Are you kidding me?
Wait. Luther.
Yes, good. Martin Luther.
Yeah. 95 Theses. I didn't think about it at all. That's an easy one.
Yeah. All right, all right. Let's do two more.
All right. The first year of the Islamic calendar marks the following event: the birth of Muhammad, the Quran is assembled into a single sacred text, the division of Sunnis and Shiites, Muhammad's flight from Mecca to Medina.
I actually don't know this, but I think it's the birth of Muhammad.
I might go with a single sacred text, but let's go with I don't know. We'll see here. Oh, never mind. Muhammad's flight from Mecca to Medina.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking that was my second guess. But I'm not.
You know what they did whenever they combined it into a single sacred text, right?
What?
They burned everything that disagreed with a certain text.
Well, that's what I
So
would do.
the Christian our textual what's the tradition or whatever they call it. I don't know the technical term for it. But is that we have like thousands of copies dating back to probably, if I remember, like 60 years. The earliest one would be like 60, 70 years after Christ died or was, rose again and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Yada, yada, yada. That's how I just described the entirety of my religion. All right. So, but I think the earliest one's like 60, 70 years. That's like the earliest one we have. So that would have been still whenever some of the apostles were alive, or at least maybe. But maybe one of them. But where was I going with this? What was I talking about? Oh yeah, how they were assembled. So so we have like thousands of them, and they all kind of go down through different lineages. Like, because you'd pass a letter to somebody, and a bunch of people would copy it, and they'd pass it out to a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
Lineage is not the right word, but I don't care. I'm just giving a brief description here. So we have all these texts, and there are like minor disagreements in all of them. There's nothing like major that causes a big change in the religion for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But you take them all together and you figure out what they all have in common, because what they all have in common is what it actually said, because and that's how you determine what is actually in there. That's a really horrible description of how it works, but that's generally how it works. In Islam, essentially they got to a point in time where they said, okay, we have all these texts and they all say radically different things. This is not going to work. Here goes the one we're using. We're burning everything else.
Wow, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Well, here,
I don't guarantee that anything I just said was correct, as always.
well, I guarantee.
I know most of that's correct.
I guarantee most of the things I say are correct.
Exactly. Most of it's correct.
Yeah. All right, here's my last question for you. Who was the first Western explorer to reach China? Or as Trump says, China.
Say that again?
Who was the first Western explorer to reach China?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, you do. You probably said his name 100 times when you were in the pool.
Oh, don't do that to me. Now you're going to make me say it out loud. Like, now I remember something because I say it in the pool. Marco Polo?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm the idiot who only remembers something because he yells it in a pool.
Well, at least you know it now.
Oh my God. All right. It's officially not winter anymore. My room, I don't have an AC thing in here. I'm in a tiny room for people that are wondering. And so it's a solid 90 degrees in here right now.
It's 80 degrees outside
and
today.
I have this foam. Where is foam? Where you can see me touch it. Foam. This is 3 inches thick. So it's just like a little tiny, it's like if I were to put 5 sweaters on, which is great during the winter because it's really cold in here and it's nice. It's perfect. It's not winter anymore.
Well, you're a Texan, so it's in your blood to be hot. Anyways, we'll do one more question from you.
I'm sweating real bad. All right, wait, am I reading a question?
Yeah.
Balboa was the first European to enter the Pacific.
Wait, I didn't hear. Balboa?
Yeah.
Like Rocky Balboa?
Yeah, but I don't think they're talking about Rocky.
Yeah.
Just a hunch.
Okay.
I guess that's how you say it. That's the only Balboa way I've ever known to say Balboa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are you going to get this one wrong? I think you might. All right, Balboa was the first European to encounter the Pacific Ocean, circumnavigate the globe, sail around the Cape of Good Hope, Encounter the Horn of Africa. Okay, every time I say something, I think I'm saying it wrong because I messed up so many words at the beginning of this quiz thing. Encounter the Horn of Africa was the last one.
I'm going to say to go around the Cape of Good Hope.
What was that?
Cape of Good Hope.
Oh, okay, keep it. No, it was enter the Pacific Ocean.
I mean, if you round the Cape of Good Hope, you're entering the Pacific Ocean.
See, here you go again, man. I'm going to have a lot of emails to send to Fact Monster.
So I don't get how you could be the first one to enter the Pacific Ocean and not go around the Cape of Good Hope.
Oh, it's good stuff.
Anyways, we're going to leave it there today. Thank you so much for listening and watching. And I'm John. That was Matt Travis. We'll see you next time.